If there's an event, you go to an event. You are the engaged, unfortunately, minority. Because there is this huge passive majority out there that has no clue still. I think they're starting to feel it though. They're starting to sense that something's not quite right. So we need to create a lot more people who are connected authority. And in order to be a good connected authority, content is king. Content is king. So you've got to have a group or organization that's creating good quality content. And when I say good quality content, those of you that follow me know that I am not a good writer at all. And I start typing and I get really frustrated, and then I do typos and all kinds. So it's not like it has to be this professional, I mean, you want it to be, but the reality is that it just needs to get the right quality content. Means truth. Truth. And that's the key. Now, I do know really good writers. Really good writers. Donna Garner. How many people know who Donna Garner is? Find out who Donna, and I'll talk about her in a little bit, but good writer. I also have, there's a guy, Michael Robbins, I'm trying to think of his, Michael S. Robbins. He writes for the Washington Times. Anyway, I know this guy from several years ago. He's a great writer, and I really love to read his articles. So I just started posting his articles all the time on my Facebook. Well, then he noticed that I was posting them all the time, so then he starts sending them to me because he knows that I'll post them. Not Michael S. Robbins, James S. Robbins. James S. Robbins. He's a great writer. So, we need more connected authority. It's all about relationships, like I said. Your friends and your sphere of influence. You don't have to have 5,000 friends on Facebook. You just have to influence the people around you. That's the power that we have. I'm gonna move forward, because what are some of the things that, besides when you're creating content, what are some of the things that a communications team can create? Press releases. Have press conferences. Your group or organization has the power to influence, and you need to act like you do. And so by having press releases, having press conferences, you're creating that power. Like I said, there's a time when you can create raw video from your phone. If Jim Pitts is at an event and you just get that on video, upload it to YouTube. But there's also time where you can create actually quality video. How many people know about the Speaker Showdown and the battles that we had with Joe Strauss? Okay. It's very interesting, the power that we have and how much we can do with very little money. What would take one of those political establishment type people thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to produce, we have the power to produce that for a whole lot less. And that's what we did with the Speaker Showdown. I'm a board member of a group called Women on the Wall, and we take on issues that matter, the safety and security of our children. And we felt like the race down in the Speaker of the House race was a huge issue because it affected legislation, and we're seeing the fruits of that now. What what Joe Strauss did is he partnered basically with the Democrats, and he was dangling that $5 billion in education to get those votes from the Democrats. So we were taking him on. We produced a video, and there are a lot of people that thought that we shouldn't fight that battle against Joe Strauss, that we needed to make nice so that we could get legislation passed that we wanted to get passed down in Austin. Hate to tell you, but Joe Strauss really could care less about playing nice with us. And so we needed to create content, good quality content, to show the public what it's all about. Whether we won or not, we needed to fight that battle and create that content, because now we're being proven right. And so there's a record of it. And that is going to be powerful for you guys, because one of his biggest allies is Jim Pitts. So we need you here following what's going on down in Austin, creating content, even if it's just getting any kind of video, so that when primary season comes around and there's candidates running against him, that you've got content already created. You've got video of him. I have video of Ted Cruz that I got of him in 2009 at a Republican women's luncheon. He gave one of the best talks at that luncheon. And I was pushing out that content back then. So now's the time to be creating that kind of content. You have the power to force the media to cover the stories, cover what's happening from our point of view. And this is what this communications team, your communications director, needs to think about. When Governor Perry was running for the presidency, there were a lot of us that weren't necessarily keen on that. And so one of the big issues that we had was the in-state tuition for illegals. The media wasn't going to cover that. But we had a great Tea Party leader in Tyler, Texas, Joanne Fleming, that did research, and she found a speech that Governor Perry gave in 2001 on the border, where he was talking about in-state tuition for illegals and this healthcare compact that he was trying to do with Mexico. So she took that speech and that information, which was actually on the governor's website, and she sent it out in an email blast to Tea Parties across the state, Tea Party leaders. And then there were those of us that took that email that she sent us with the links and posted it on our blogs, on our websites. So I posted it on Voices in Power. There were other people that posted it on their websites. Then the next day, and then I put that on Facebook and Twitter and put that out through my network. Then the next day, Red State, which is a conservative paper, picked it up. Or not paper, a conservative online site. They picked up the story. They wrote a story about it. So then I took their article and posted it on Facebook and Twitter. Well, now, because I'm one of those connected authority type people, I have people like Bud Kennedy, you know, from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. How many people know the lovely Bud Kennedy? I bet you do. And then Bob Garrett, who's actually a good writer, Bob Garrett with the Dallas Morning News. So those people follow my Facebook and Twitter. So when I was putting the Red State article and the information that Joanne Fleming, then I got a call from Bud Kennedy to get a statement. on what I thought of Governor Perry and in-state tuition for illegals. And I said, well, the challenge is that the largest donors to the Republican Party, the super PAC that stopped the sanctuary cities legislation, were some of Governor Perry's largest donors, Charles Butts and Bob Perry. And so I personally think that Governor Perry's more beholden to his largest donors than he is to the constituents in the state of Texas. And to me, as a mother, that poses a national security threat. That's what I think. And then he called Joanne Fleming and got a statement from her. So then there was an article in the Dallas Morning News quoting myself and Joanne Fleming. So then I took that article and posted it on Facebook and Twitter and pushed it out there. And then I just so happened to be at the at the Western Conservative Conference in Denver, Colorado, and I ran into Rick Santorum, and I said, hey, Rick Santorum, did you know that Governor Perry likes in-state tuition for illegals? That could be an issue that you could possibly use in a debate. And you know what? It was in a debate. Michelle Bachmann picked it up. So I don't know if that's exactly the flow that it went, but I do know that we had an influence. I know that by Joanne Fleming doing the research and finding that content, pushing it out through this network of Tea Party groups across the state, and all of us picking it up, we were able to force the media to cover it. Now think of that. That's on a state and national level. Think of that on a local level. Think of the power that you have, the people in this room. If we just had the people in this room, a few of you, writing or blogging, setting up a blog, and you were all pushing out content that was created from the content director or found by the content director, and you're pushing it out here locally, you have the power to drive the narrative. Don't wait for the media to come to you to cover it. Be pushing it out there and making it so forceful that the media cannot not look at it. That's the power that we have. Oops. There are, in the primary, there's going to be major races across the state. And the thing about it is, people are starting to wake up. And there are a lot of people who aren't real happy with what's going on with the Republican Party. And so think about your get out the vote efforts. Think about your creating content efforts, not in preparation for the general election when you're taking on the Democrats. You've got to think about it in the primary. Your get out the vote effort has to be in the primary, but you have to have good content created that's taking on Jim Pitts in the primary. And so time is of the essence. But the power that we have, we're creating these communication teams all across the state. Right now, we had a meeting a couple of, when was that, about a month, 2 months ago? We decided at that meeting that the issues that we were going to take on in order to bring people into the political world, if you will, were going to be education. How many people, raise your hand, know about C-Scope? Yes. It's getting out there. It's getting out there. We're taking on education and the Second Amendment. People understand that the threats we face in becoming unarmed are real because they're seeing it on a national level, and that will bring people into the fold who are not Tea Party people, or that they'll wake up. Let me tell you something about education. This is huge. The more I dig into this, the more I find out. How many people, raise your hand, know about Common Core? The Common Core curriculum is the federally mandated curriculum being pushed down. 45 states have implemented it in their states. Governor Perry, you know I'm not a big Governor Perry fan all the time, but I have to tell you something. On education, he stood strong. He told the federal government no on the Common Core curriculum. There is a video out there, and if you go to voicesempower.com, and I'll show you that website in a minute, but if you go to voicesempower.com and put in Robert Scott, he's a former education commissioner for the state of Texas. He was just in Georgia talking about how the federal government was trying to push down Common Core, or push Common Core into the state of Texas. The tactics that they were using to try to get, that they basically wanted him to sign on to Common Core curriculum before they even wrote it. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yeah. And he said no. Well, while all that was happening, in over 875 districts in the state of Texas, they've been implementing C-Scope. And you'll hear there's a connection between Common Core curriculum and C-Scope, and the connection is Linda Darling Hammond, who's a humanist and very close ties to Bill Ayers. She did not actually write the curriculum. I was in a 5-hour meeting yesterday in Region 11 in Tarrant County at the Education Service Center. And they kept saying, C-Scope has been around for 20 years. And I was saying, no. C-Scope was put in place in 2006 when they put a person in each of these 20 education service centers across the state, and they developed this TESCCC 501c3 nonprofit. And they said, no, Alice, it's been in place 20 years. It just wasn't called C-Scope. And it started, this is why it pays to have people down in Austin going to meetings. A friend of mine was down in Austin at the Kaufman County Days this past week, and Thomas Ratliff was talking. How many people know who Thomas Ratliff is? Thomas Ratliff is a State Board of Education elected official from East Texas. He said in that meeting that C-Scope was developed in his district. And he was touting that. Did you know that Thomas Ratliff was, there was a case that was brought to the Attorney General, and he ruled that Thomas Ratliff was on the State Board of Education illegally? You know why? He's a lobbyist. Who's he a lobbyist for? Microsoft. Who was working with Bill Ayers, Linda Darling Hammond, and funding a lot of this Common Core curriculum? Bill Gates. So, in what Bill Ayers and those guys did, if you look at who's running our country and who's running the academia in our colleges and now in our high schools and now through Common Core Curriculum and C-Scope, it's the radicals from the 60s. When Bill Ayers, when they blew up that, tried to blow it up and it didn't work and they couldn't take down our country, they devised another plan. They went into academia, into the colleges, and they started developing all of these professionals and these curriculums like Linda Darling Hammond. And when I was in that meeting yesterday, one of the ladies, she was saying, well, Linda Darling Hammond didn't write it. She wasn't a writer of the curriculum. It was just her philosophy that the writers used. That's what they did. They created all these professional academics who started teaching the philosophies of socialism, communism, humanism, and those people are now in Austin running the education. That's how they did it. So what do we do?
Push it out.
That's right. How do we push it out? When our State Board of Education elected officials, Thomas Ratliff, he didn't leave. When Attorney General Abbott ruled that he was on illegally, he didn't get off. He's actually now vice chair of the committee because there was no law or legislation put forth. There's no way to get him out. And Pat Hardy over in Tarrant County voted for him to be vice chair, and she's out saying how wonderful C-Scope is. Now let me throw another kink in there for you, connect another dot. So we've got all these people fighting against Common Core Curriculum and C-Scope. It's public education, it's scary. We're going to take our kids and put them in private school, or we're going to push for school choice in charter schools. Sounds great, huh? Only challenge is that when they put in the charter school legislation back in the 90s, they didn't say that you had to be a U.S. citizen to start a charter school. How many people know of the Harmony Science Centers in Texas?
Yeah, experience here this week.
There's 38, 39 of them in the state of Texas. There is legislation being put forth right now by Dan Patrick, who's our hero on C-Scope. He has put forth Senate Bill 2 that if it goes through as written, it could change, and we need to be pressuring them to change the legislation. Because I'm not against school choice necessarily. I'm not against charter schools necessarily. But I sure as heck want safeguards on charter school, and I want the people that put them in place to be U.S. citizens. If the legislation gets passed as it is right now, it takes the cap off the charter schools. Right now it's about 218, something like that, schools that we can have in the state of Texas, charter schools. If this legislation gets passed, it's unlimited. They take the cap off. If there are public school facilities that are not being used, and a charter school wants to use them, they shall. Not that the district may give them the facility. They shall give them the facility. And they're not going to pay for it. They pay $1. The Harmony Science Centers are run by the Cosmos Foundation, which is run by Fatwa Gulen, who's an Islamic extremist, and it's the Gulen school, the Gulen movement that turned Turkey over to the Muslim Brotherhood. The day that the C-Scope hearing was happening on January 31st down in Austin, it was Muslim Day at the Capitol. Of the 12 sponsoring groups of Muslim Day at the Capitol, 8 of them have direct ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. Let me tell you something. My friend Kennard that was there today, he's a target. Because they're targeting the Black and Hispanic inner city communities. They're targeting those kids to try, because they're the most susceptible to the radical ideas. Our kids, they've got us. We're here. We're activists. We're going to go to our school board and we're going to fight and we're going to get people elected on our local school boards. Those kids in the inner city of Houston who voted for Obama, they're the targets. And this mom, I care about my friend Kennard. This kid is sharp. He just doesn't have the information. And they need us to stand up for them. Because our kids, we can control their environment, but those kids in Houston, they're going to be voters, like my friend Kennard. So how do we do it? How do we fight back? By setting up these communication teams across the state, we can affect our local elections. We can take people like Jim Pitts out. We may not have done it the last time, but we can do it the next time. We're getting more and more organized each time. So if we have communication teams set up all across the state, think about this. If there's 200 grassroots, Tea Party, women's groups, whatever kind of group it is, but they're on board with us. If we have 200 groups, and those 200 groups have an average of only 100 people in their group, and those 100 people only have 200 friends on Facebook, we have the power to reach over 4 million people through social media. We've just got to use it. As individuals, we did a workshop, and I recommend that you do workshops. Bring in young people to do a workshop. We did it at the University of Texas at Tyler. And we had these young college kids come in, and we just set people up on Facebook and Twitter and answered questions. In Frisco, we had a great kid, Ray, who showed up at an hour before every Frisco meeting, and he would just answer questions for people. After they took the workshop, he would just answer questions and make sure as things change on Facebook and Twitter, he could help answer questions. And ongoing, continually keep your group activated on Facebook. We had this workshop in Tyler, and this young girl stood up at the end, and she told the group, she said, who most of them were 65 or older, and she said, "Thank you so much for being here." She said, "I post conservative information on my Facebook, but I get attacked. I get attacked from my friends, I get attacked from my professors, I get just beaten down." And she said, "Now that I know you're friends with me on Facebook, you've got my back." Our kids need us. And they're on Facebook and Twitter. Actually, I hate to tell you, but my 13-year-old told me that, "Mom, Facebook's out. It's Instagram." They're all on Instagram. But we still are all on Facebook, our friends. But those kids need us to keep up with technology. And our friends who are not politically active need us to keep up on technology. I always say, fish where the fish are. If the fish are on Facebook, go fishing on Facebook. That's where they are. So that takes us back. We have the power to elect civil servants. They may have the dollar, but they're using that dollar to buy votes. And that's what we have. We have the power to motivate our friends and our neighbors to get out and vote. And if we are creating the content, Governor Perry did not win the primary. And Governor Perry did not win the primary because the people of Texas, the grassroots people of Texas, said no. And we informed the rest of the country on why. That is the power that you have. Inform your friends and neighbors as to why Jim Pitts doesn't need to be elected again. Inform your friends and neighbors why C-scope is so dangerous. And I'll close with this. On Women on the Wall, we are doing conference calls. Every week we've got a radio show on Monday mornings from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. This Monday we're going to have Mary Bowen, who was on Glenn Beck's show just this last week, talk. She's the anonymous teacher that was feeding information about C-scope. She's going to be on our radio show on Monday, along with Janice Van Cleve, who's the science teacher who's been exposing C-scope with her daughter Ginger. They're going to be on a radio show. You can go to womenonthewall.org to find it. You can call in to that radio show and ask questions. But the reason why we're doing that radio show, because we're not advertising, we're not making any money. It's not for that. We're creating content. And so you can listen to that radio show at 10 to 11. You can call in, you can be a part of it. But if you can't, if you're working, it's going to be archived. And you can, on your way home from work, listen to it. And if you think it's important, the information that's produced, you can share that on Facebook and Twitter and share it with your friends and neighbors. The other thing that we're doing on Women on the Wall is I talked to Bill Ames last night. He is a man who worked very hard when they were fighting on the social studies textbook fight down in Austin. He was making sure that they didn't just strip our social studies books of history. Bill Ames is working with me. We're doing letters to the editor samples on C-scope, letters to our House of Representatives, letters to our senators, state senators, examples of that. So we're going to provide all that content on C-scope and on the Second Amendment. That kind of information. There's legislation that's being put forth right now on the Second Amendment issue. We're going to have tabs where you can go and take that information and blast it out to your friends and neighbors. That'll be on womenonthewall.org. But here's what you've got to do. This is what you've got to promise me. Take these tactics, these letters to the editor, these kind of things, and after this legislative session, you get ready for the primary. And you start creating this communication team, you start creating content, and you guys write those letters to the editor, get that information out. And that's how we're going to take back our counties, our state. And if we can do it locally, and if they're doing it locally in Alabama and Louisiana, and I'll tell you, Tennessee as well, the southern states, we're targets, big time. Big time.
Always Alabama.
Yes, exactly, exactly. If we will fight back locally, we'll take back our state and we'll take back our nation. And I would love to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
I was at the meeting with you earlier today.
Oh, good.
And yeah, your friend, I can see you're breaking in with him. He's got a long way to go, but at least he's coming along, and you can talk with him.
Oh, definitely.
So you've got some progress.
Yes, and I'll tell you, the reason why I know Kennard's a great kid, even with this Facebook stuff that's really scary as a mom to see. He's got pictures of his grandma, pictures of his grandpa, his family, his nephew. Those people are important to him. And that's why I said today, I don't care if you, the national security issue is big to me, because I don't care if you're a liberal Democrat mom or a conservative Republican mom, we all love our children. And we will all fight to protect our children. And at that point, it's not a Republican thing or a Democrat thing, it's an American thing. And so if we can bring kiddos like Kennard in and explain to him the national security threat, and that the Second Amendment, you heard him today. He was saying, you know, in his neighborhood, you've got to disarm some of these people who are the thugs, I think he called them. But we're saying, no, you've got to be able to protect yourself, not only from the thug, but from the Islamic extremists who are trying to get into our state. And Houston is an area where they're congregating. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
How did the meeting go as far as guns and
It went very well, very well. I think that, and it started out from a perspective of our rights are given to us by God. And we had great black pastors who talked about that. Our inalienable rights come from God. And then we had a section on the Second Amendment. We had a woman who's been in the law enforcement field and knows guns. And it's kind of funny because for me, I'm not a gun owner. Ray Myers was trying to get me to go to his class today in Kaufman, and I'm now considering going and getting my conceal and carry. I never ever thought that I would even think about that. And it's funny because my son, who's 15 now, when he was first getting old enough to hunt, my husband wanted to take him out to these deer leases, and I grew up fishing. I have 4 brothers, but we all grew up fishing. We didn't grow up around guns, and I was always really nervous. So when he was taking my baby to go hunting, I was like, oh, you can't do that. Y'all can't have any beer at the deer. you know, and I sat and prayed all weekend while they were gone. And I was such a wreck. This was my baby going hunting, and he was going to be around guns. And a friend of my husband called me, and he was like, okay, Alice, you got to get over this, because you want him to be educated on gun safety. You want him going and spending time with his dad at the deer lease and learning the power of a gun and what it can do, and learning gun safety. And you just got to get over it, Alice. And I have, and I'm actually, so it's interesting by this issue coming up, I'm sitting there fighting for my friend Kennard to be able to protect himself, but and with what I do and how many people I tick off with what I do, it's probably something that I really need to do. Yes, sir.
You know, I want to thank you for your opening comment, recognizing that your business is going to be gone if you don't spend time fighting. I really believe that one of the challenges we face individually is that we're so busy with things, we don't have time to learn and to do, when in fact, and sooner than we can imagine, we won't have any of these things that we're doing, and we'll be wondering what happened.
You are exactly right.
One other thing, if I may, and forgive me, but you know, I love your national security comment. That was wonderful. What do you think about, you know, sometimes we get so disengaged because we can't influence the world or the nation, and it seems to me that also with information, we could be getting to know our neighbors and building a neighborhood that trusts one another and moves together and we'll stand together. I mean, that is extremely powerful to me, and you know, that gets people's attention when you get that, and that's something that you know you can do.
Right. Well, and I think by doing that, you are affecting national security. Because if they're here locally, and if we don't coordinate together, if we don't know our friend, because I can tell you they know who their friends are. If something happens, we need to have each other. I really, it's interesting because I'm on these national security calls, and that's national security with Women on the Wall. That's something that we've really taken on. I encourage you to go to Women on the Wall as well. We produced a video right before the election. We felt like that last debate that was supposed to be on national security, that Romney just really blew it. We were trying quickly to create a video to take on that issue, but we were taking it on from a perspective of local. If you go to Women on the Wall, you'll see it's called Avoidable. A big picture, it says Avoidable. And when you click on it, you either have the option to watch this video through Facebook or watch what it says non-interactive. The non-interactive is just a YouTube video, so you can click it on there. If you have Facebook, you can watch it through Facebook. The narrative of this video is a mom. It's actually me in the video. You don't see my face, you just see my hands. But getting up in the morning, getting my children off to school, and you go and you open up the laptop and start scrolling through Facebook and Twitter and realize that Israel's been hit, Europe's been hit. It's a jihad across the world. And then, is it happening locally? And the reason why it's called Avoidable is because knowledge is power, and if we realize what's happening, and while we're organizing locally, and we realize that they're coming in through our education, that's the power that we have. When there's a class in Loudoun County, Texas, one of the most conservative counties in the state, and they have high school girls wearing burqas in a lesson. They say it's not C-scope. I know the lesson that teacher was teaching from. We've got it. And it's not even the lesson, it's the philosophy that for them to wear a burqa without having the foundation to know what the burqa represents. To them, in this class, it was presented as a cultural thing. Almost like a costume. Do these young 15-year-old girls know what the burqa represents? The oppression, the women that have been mutilated and murdered. And we're here making it look like a costume. We're desensitizing so that when they're here locally, we don't see that as a threat. That's why we have the power to fight back on national security locally by not allowing for ourselves and our children to be desensitized. That's the power. Yes, ma'am?
We're being conditioned.
You're exactly right.
2 years ago, when the state senate honored Fethullah Gulen, basically that just legitimized him. I mean, how can you possibly dispute somebody's up to no good when the state senate of Texas honored him?
Yes.
You know, I mean, and wearing the burqas. Why are you so afraid of, you know? And then just this week, Osama bin Laden's son-in-law warned us, there's a great army forming against us. That was not an idle threat. I believe there really is.
Right.
And we have a friend who's working at Comanche Peak Power Plant. There is at least 20% of the workforce at Comanche Peak are Muslim, and they have a Muslim prayer room at Comanche Peak.
Yes, sir. I know you.
He had a Bible verse up in his cubicle, and he was told by his supervisor, "You need to take that Bible verse down." He said, "That's offensive." He said, "I'll take my Bible verse down when you get rid of the prayer room."
Right.
He said, "Okay, well, just keep your Bible verse in your cubicle."
Yes, sir.
I'm very concerned about the Harmony School. I work part-time for Mountain View College, and I go out and visit campuses, and I work with new teachers. By the way, I've been talking against C-SPAN, and they do little
C-SCOPE.
things. I mean C-SCOPE. And they do little things to punish me at the college. And I tried to get on campus at the Harmony School in Duncanville, and you'd have thought that I spit in Osama bin Laden's face. It was very interesting. People were taking photographs of me with their cell phones. They had the loud Islamic music going. When I came up, and then they shut it off. They parked the car in the driveway where I couldn't get in. And then one of my interns taught there. And Rodica, they hired her because they thought she was Muslim. When they found out that she was not Muslim, she had to go to another school. But she did tell me, she said, while she was the short couple of months she was there, that when they had staff development, she and one other non-Muslim had to go to a special room, and everybody else went into this other room. Wow. And she said there's a lot of political stuff going on, and she said the term jihad was, I think, in the curriculum. What do you know about this? Are they connected to? Well, you said you thought that there was a connection between the Harmony schools and.
Well, the Cosmos Foundation is the nonprofit foundation that runs the Harmony Science Centers. Interesting fact. They're the consultant for the Harmony Science Schools in Texas. You know who that is? That's helping them navigate through the legislative process to get access to bond money or tax dollars? Karen Hughes. Karen Hughes. So it's a big deal, and they're billing themselves as math and science centers, and that's. I want you all, how many people know who Frank Gaffney is? He's wonderful. Follow Frank Gaffney, Center for Security Policy. There's, on Women on the Wall, there's, in the middle of the website, there's a link to a community conversation. Take Two is the name of it. And our special guest on that call is Frank Gaffney. Frank is in Virginia. And they just fought, their local district was trying to put in a Harmony Science Center. And they fought against it. And there's video of a woman, Mary Oddie, I believe is her name, and she testified in front of the school board. And she was a teacher at one of these Harmony schools. She ended up marrying a Turkish man who was a teacher, and they are exposing from the inside exactly what's happening in these Harmony Science, these Gulen schools. In other states, they're called different things. In Texas, they're the Harmony Science Center. In Austin, there's the Harmony Public Math and Science Center. In Austin.
Liberals do that all the time, don't they? They give something that's liberal and good conservative.
Well, but these aren't just liberals, because then you have people like Karen Hughes, who it's all about school choice, and it's all about pushing math and science. They make it sound good whether you're liberal or conservative, and they're using our tax dollars. Yes, sir, Harlan.
Linda and I've been, we've got two granddaughters, 7 and 11. And they're in the Denton schools. We looked it up on the C-scope list. They're not in C-scope. But we hear a lot of things that they say that we got question marks.
Here.
That it's not C-scope, but there's another version coming out that's not the C-scope, that is out. What is that?
Well, here's what they're doing. You have the TSA, the Texas Association of Administrators, that our tax dollars are paying for our superintendents to be a part of this association. And then you've got the TASB, Texas Association of School Boards. And so you've got all these school board members that use our tax dollars to go to these conferences across the country, or they have conferences. Well, who are the speakers at their conferences? Linda Darling Hammond. All these education professionals, educrats.
Well, one of the things, what I said that is, there's things going on, it doesn't have to be C-scope.
Right.
There are other things out there that they're pushing the same thing. It may not be called that because it's the same thing.
Right, and what they're doing is they're going to these conferences and learning about these other curriculums or other technology platforms, or, you know, they're taking the textbooks out of the schools. It was interesting in my meeting yesterday. Some of the consultants were saying at the Education Service Center, because we have these 20 Education Service Centers, and they service the districts and train teachers and train them on, you know, different ways to teach and different curriculums that are out there, scope and sequence and vertical alignment, and they'll tell you, oh, they have to have us in order to follow the TEKS, the Texas, Texas Knowledge and Skills, and the TEKS are mandated by the state and the State Board of Education, so they blame it all on the TEKS and the SBOE, that you need us so you can follow the TEKS and pass the test. But the way that they're training the teachers